Hello, friends. Steve Stockton here with you. Today's episode, we're going to bring you the strange vanishing of a filmmaker in the woods. Now, we've previously covered this case in one of our compilations, but today we're going to do a little deeper dive. Join me. Let's take a walk and see. The woods can be a beautiful and mystifying place where all sorts of wonder and fun seem to call us sometimes, and when we hear that call, most of us can't help but heed it. What happens, though, when it's darkness beckoning to us out there in those densely wooded and oftentimes civilizationless places? And at the end of the day, we still can't resist the urge to go. They say that the hours or even days leading up to a person's disappearance will give investigators at least an inkling as to what could have possibly happened to a person. And it's true that in most missing person cases, even those without an official ending, they all have some sort of order to them. As in, the person did this for this reason, and then did that for that reason, and then something happened. Every once in a while, though, we come across something truly bizarre and a real-life mystery when someone does something baffling and unexplainable right before they vanish off the face of the earth, never to be seen or heard from again, and leaving everyone scratching their heads as to what could have led the person to behave in such a strange manner, most often completely inconsistent with how they presented themselves day to day to the people around them. Folks, here's one of those cases. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Terrence Shamil Woods Jr., at just 26 years old, had made quite the name for himself with his quick success as a filmmaker. Though educated in England, he was a resident of Capitol Heights, Maryland, in the United States. He worked on many documentary-type films and numerous TV programs, some of which had him traveling to and working in exotic places like Turkey and Alaska. And in these places, he would be even more secluded, sometimes out in the field filming in the farthest flung parts of these respective places. He was not only used to the great outdoors, but also used to working in the strenuous conditions they often provided, and was said to never even break a sweat when he would find out the next far out-of-the-way place he would be shooting. He loved the adventure and the rush of it all. He definitely wasn't opposed or a stranger to roughing it out there, and 2018 was no exception. Terrence was working for the London-based production company called Raw TV, who we in the States may know best for their show on the Discovery Channel called Gold Rush. In October of that same year, he was asked to go out into the wilderness of Montana and Idaho for a few weeks to work on a documentary for the British show Whitewater. The episode he would be filming for was one about a place in the heart of north-central Idaho in the Nez Perce Clearwater National Forest, and, more specifically, a sort of well-known and somewhat legendary abandoned gold mine called Penman Mine. Terrence was one of 13 crew members, including himself, and at first things seemed to be going fine and everything was totally normal. He was said to be in good spirits and nothing was out of the ordinary with him or really at all. At first, that is. It didn't take long, though, for things to take a somewhat remarkable turn for the bizarre and strange, specifically regarding Terrence Woods Jr. On October 5th, 2018, the entire crew was at the mine filming for the whole day. Terrence and other members of the crew were experienced and fully equipped to handle the rugged and somewhat treacherous mountainous terrain. Most of the crew chalked Terrence's being unusually quiet that day to tiredness, as they were all feeling a little exhausted after spending the whole day out in this isolated and abandoned and somewhat unfamiliar place. When they were done filming, and as they began to pack everything up for that day, Terrence would suddenly, and seemingly out of nowhere, do something very strange that no one could explain or make any sense of. He was having a conversation with one of the miners, and, according to a witness who later came forward and gave a statement as to what he had seen transpire, Terrence excused himself from that conversation by saying that he had to go and answer the call of nature. Our witness watched from a nearby van, and here's what he also reported. He says that out of nowhere, he was struck with this seemingly random and strange gut feeling to look over to the cliff where Terrence had just been standing. That's when he says he noticed that Terrence wasn't there, and all that was left was a radio that he had been using, just left there on the ground. The witness said he immediately jumped out of the van and ran over to the cliff because he thought Terrence had somehow accidentally fallen off of it. He was shocked to discover, though, as he stood there looking down over this extremely high cliff, that Terrence was already approximately 15 feet down it, and that he hadn't fallen, but had taken off running. He remembered thinking that he had never in his life seen anyone run that fast. He turned and yelled to some other crew members, telling them all to get into a van and drive down to the main road. The idea was to cut Terrence off at this road and find out what in the world was going on. The witness took off running after his friend. He was calling out, but Terrence didn't even look back. This witness had extensive search and rescue training and stopped his pursuit for fear that if Terrence were for whatever reason scared, chasing after him could make him even more fearful. It was a very confusing scene. He said that when he had finally gotten back up the cliff, the crew who had driven to the main road to cut Terrence off hadn't seen him. It was as though he had blinked out of existence somewhere between where the witness had left him and where the main road was. The witness further claims the crew then searched, and once they found a house with a telephone, they called for help and reported Terrence as missing. Terrence had taken his cell phone with him when he took off running, but he'd left behind his two-way radio and his backpack containing all of his belongings. He had no supplies, and even though he had his cell phone, there was no service out there in the middle of nowhere. By the time authorities showed up, it was nearly dark, and everyone was concerned as to how he would survive overnight. A preliminary search of the immediate area was conducted, but when nothing useful was found, due to how dark it was out there, the search would be halted until first light in the morning. Overnight that night, a fresh sheet of snow had fallen, but during the search, which consisted of helicopters, search dogs, and infrared camera technology, not even a footprint was found, and no one was any closer to figuring out what in the world had happened to Terrence Woods Jr. by the end of the first search day. A search team member even stated, quote, "It's as if he had never been there at all," end quote. After a week, the official search was called off, but not without some very bizarre clues that would surface. First, it was found that, though his job called for him to be in Idaho until sometime in mid-November, Terrence had recently sent a text message to his father informing him that he would be returning home on October 10th. He did not elaborate as to why he would be cutting his trip short, and Terrence had never before left a job early, regardless of circumstances, location, or anything else for that matter. After speaking to some of his friends and family, investigators found that Terrence had been extremely anxious over this shoot. This was something else that had never happened before. He loved the outdoors and he loved his job, so he never had any problems or issues with getting the work done, regardless of what it took. His behavior and anxiety about it was enough to raise some eyebrows and make his loved ones feel the investigators should know about it after the fact. Indeed, in the weeks leading up to the shoot, Terrence had told those closest to him that he didn't even want to go on the trip, but again, he didn't elaborate as to why he felt this way, and everyone just let it go and thought nothing more of it until after his disappearance. It was extremely strange, all this sudden anxiety and being unsure, as the only thing he is said to have loved more than his job were the adventures in the places that it often took him, these strange and exotic, though oftentimes isolated places. His sister, Sharnia Tisdale, disagrees with the other's narrative, however, and said that she spoke to her brother right before he left, and he seemed absolutely fine to her. She stated that the whole situation seemed somehow unusual to her, and that since she wasn't there and all she had to go on was what the other crew who were with him that day were saying, she didn't really know what to think. She claimed she and Terrence spoke often, and that they told each other basically everything. So if there was something wrong or something bothering Terrence, he would have certainly mentioned it to her, and further elaborated on it. She says, though, he didn't. She disagrees that he was anxious leading up to the trip, and also that he was expressing disinterest in going at all. She stated, quote, "He's traveled around the world. He really likes to do TV. He's a loving person and caring and all-around good person," end quote. On the first morning of their first day filming, Terrence had done something which at the time his father hadn't thought anything more of, but in retrospect said it seemed rather eerie when all was said and done. It seems Terrence had sent him a text message of some video footage, which was described as creepy, of a river flowing through the canyon. There was no text or explanation as to why he was sending this or what it was supposed to mean. It was brought up afterwards that Terrence and the production manager weren't seeing eye to eye on some things and had been having some disagreements, but it's not known if this is or isn't connected to his disappearance. The family orchestrated searches utilizing volunteers and posted flyers with Terrence's picture all over the region. Hope quickly faded, however, that he had made it out of the area alive, mainly due to the harsh and heavy snowfall that had almost immediately upon his vanishing rolled through the expanse. His family and those closest to him said that Terrence had absolutely no history of any sort of mental illness either, and everyone was completely baffled as to why he just up and ran down the cliff that way, never looking back. Admittedly, it would be fairly easy to get lost or turned around in this particular area of mountainous and treacherous terrain, but the question still remains of what in the world made him run in the first place. Was he running towards something, or was he running away from it? If it was either of those things, then what exactly was he running to or from? Unfortunately, no one knows the answers to these questions still to this day, and Terrence Woods Jr. has never been seen or heard from again, and no remains or further evidence or clues have ever surfaced. His family have since theorized that perhaps he was either fearful of one or more of the crew members there with him that day, or fearful due to the actions of the same. Authorities have ruled out this theory, though, or any theory stating that someone else on the crew is involved, and have been adamant that there is absolutely no sign whatsoever of foul play. They believe that he had suffered some sort of random mental breakdown and either just randomly up and booked it down the cliff, or that he had long been planning to take his own life out there where he knew nobody would easily find him. However, we would like to point out that none of this is in keeping with Terrence's usual personality or mental and medical history. The only option left, at least to those of us who have seen situations like this before, albeit not very often, is what Sir Arthur Conan Doyle once stated: when you have eliminated all which is impossible, then whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. Could some otherworldly, paranormal, or even extraterrestrial force have been at play here? Could he have been lured out there into the woods somewhere and then possibly passed through a portal of some sort? Obviously, this is just speculation, and there isn't and could be no evidence for this one way or the other. But it is something we should all consider. Given what we know on this channel about what's happening all over the world in national parks and forested and wooded areas, could Terrence have been super sensitive to these types of things and perhaps saw something that no one else could? Did he see something only meant for him to see? We just don't know, and Terrence's loved ones still struggle with the details of the disappearance and the overall vanishing in general. His father has allegedly accused the police of not properly investigating the case due to alleged racism. However, the police stand by their statement that they did all they could and did exactly what they would have done for anyone in the same circumstance. We now leave it up to you. What do you think happened to Terrence Woods Jr. on that day back in October 2018, when he suddenly seemingly went from a perfectly normal, rather successful filmmaker to another missing person who seemingly vanished into thin air and without a trace under very strange and bizarre circumstances? His world and the world of those closest to him changed literally in the blink of an eye, and not knowing the why or how of that has got to be one of the most painful and frustrating things in the world for his family. What do you think of the strange vanishing of Terrence Woods Jr.? I look forward to your comments and theories, but please keep it friendly and respectful. Until we meet again, be good to yourselves and each other. Please don't disappear. As for me, I'll see you a little further on down the trail. I'm Steve Stockton, and I'll talk to you next time. Be sure and tell your animals I said hi.